I'm going to start this hearing. First of all, I want to say that Councilor Jubenville is home sick. He's under the weather, and he sends us regrets. And Councilor Jubenville and I share Wellesley. We represent Wellesley, and for some reason, they gerrymandered and gave me half and gave Bob half. So I'm really pleased that I will have the opportunity to preside over Tom Hammond's hearing today. So with that, I'm Marilyn Petito Devani, and I have waited. This hearing was scheduled for 10. It's almost 10 past 10, and so I will start the hearing. There's no councilors present, but it's important that we go by our schedule and have this hearing start. So first of all, I want to welcome you, and I will read the letter from the governor. Dear councilors, I am pleased to nominate Thomas W. Hammond for reappointment as a member of the Appellate Tax Board to a term expiring in March 1, 2024. I submit this nomination and designation for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 58A, Section 1. I appreciate your consideration of this nominee. A resume is attached for your convenience. So again, I welcome you, and if you could give us the names of the witnesses.
Sure. Mark D. Francisco, D.E. capital F-R-A-N-C-I-S-C-O. He's the chief counsel at the Appellate Tax Board. And Patricia Good is the commissioner of the Appellate Tax Board as well.
Okay, very good. So I will start with your witnesses. Which order do you want me to take? Does it matter? Okay, I will take Patricia Good.
Thank you. Good morning.
Why don't you sit down?
Oh, okay. I love it.
I'll be more brief than you can sit right now.
Okay.
No, I think there.
As you know, this is Tom's third time, his third nomination. I think you already know that he qualified to do this job, so I'll be very brief. I just want to let you know that, first of all, thank you for helping me be here today. I want to tell you that Tom is continuously working to improve our agency. He's implemented a lot of management changes recently that have improved our functions. He's always operating to improve our agency. He's implemented changes really right up and make our decisions to ensure that they're as consistent with one another and the law as possible. He's implemented changes to how those people department-wise our findings so that we can promulgate very efficiently and better serve our public. And that has panned out. I checked last year, we promulgated more findings than we have in 5 years. So these changes he's making are working, and I think we're serving our public better. I have seen a lot of our practicing community recently since this nomination has been public. They are all very happy about this nomination. They feel very confident in Tom as an nominee. So I hope I've given you a similar feeling of confidence in Mr. Hammond. Our whole voting public, our practicing public is very happy with this nomination. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm very pleased to see you and to publicly state my apology. Patricia Good has been an outstanding member of the Appellate Tax Board, and they all have terms. And your term expired a year and a half, and I publicly said it's not fair to people who are on boards and commissions when their term is expired, because they go to work every day not knowing whether you're going to get someone to replace them or whether you really are going to keep your job. And I want you to know publicly, the councilors have no control of that. And I spoke many, many times at our public assembly asking when are we going to have the reappointment on the Appellate Tax Board. And so, I just want to apologize to you, that you had to wait so
I know
long.
it's not.
In fact, our nominee today, his term expires Saturday, a year ago, Saturday, a year. And that's not right, because we have outstanding people that are working in our commissions, and it's not fair to not appoint them, or take action when the term's expired. So I want to put that publicly on the record, okay? So I thank you so much for coming, so good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And our next witness is, and you're going to have to sit down and pronounce your name to me.
It sounds like San Francisco. It's Mark D. Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Chief Counsel of the Board, and
I
I'm.
should be able to pronounce those names again, you know, the T-O-B, right?
You have that many vowels.
So you were the counsel.
Yes, I am.
So tell me, how long you've known the nominee and what's your experience with him?
Well, I've known him certainly since he came on the board, which I think was 12 years ago. I've served as his chief counsel for that time, but also in prior life, when Tom was a litigator for the Department of Revenue, I knew him there as well. Because he practiced on the board. And it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to have been asked to speak about him. And the council's well aware, I think, of his credentials, his expertise. So what I wanted to mention very briefly is Tom's role as a manager and as basically as a person who has positively influenced everyone who he encounters. First at the board, he's brought a number of highly qualified people on board, not the least of which was prior witness, Patricia hired her as tax counsel first. The governor saw what a good candidate she was for a board member to make her a board member. He's made a series of other appointments, and perhaps more importantly, he's made a practice of promoting from within a number of our administrative staff. He has moved up the ladder, a couple of managers from people that were administrative staff, brought people up to different positions. So everyone at the board is loyal to him and does their best job for him because he's such an effective manager. And that's a very important part of his role as chairman. I also have the honor of serving as an adjunct faculty member with Tom at the law school LLM program. And I see how devoted he is to the students there, not only in teaching, but in helping with career advice and so forth. And it's just, again, he goes out of his way to make sure the people that he deals with are treated fairly and are advanced in their careers. And finally, he's wearing his Wellesley tie today. He's a coach at the Wellesley High girls hockey team, and they are perennially in the finals of the state championships. But apart from that, again, helping the girls that he works with move on, writing letters of recommendation for college and so forth. So I think as chairman, it's very important that we have someone like Tom who is devoted to the people that he works with and is advancing them. And as Trish mentioned, I think that's a credit to him that the board is achieving what it is achieving.
So how long have you been counsel?
Longer than I'd like to admit. I've been there in this stint since 1992. I had been in private practice prior to that for 4 years. And for 4 years prior to that, I was counsel of the board. So it's a total really of what, 27, 30 some years.
Yeah, that's quite a responsibility. Right. So if you were going to give me a word to describe the nominee's most outstanding quality, what would it be?
That's a very good question. I would say compassion, as odd as that is in a forum like this and for a legal job. Again, he really looks after the best interest of the people that he deals with. And that's litigants as well as the people he works with and the people he teaches.
Well, that's just what I would like to hear, because one of the things I look at with all the nominees, from judges to parole board, appellate tax so now it's your turn, and I have to say that I have been supporting you 13 years, so you're no stranger to me. So, so tell me what's happened and what you're doing, and
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear before the council. I also want to thank my witnesses for coming up on this cold day.
I'm sorry, council's not here because you're outstanding, and I'm saying that before I even have a hearing, so I want to say that.
No, thank you for that. You know, since the 12 years that I've been at the board, when I first got there, we had about 30,000 cases in our inventory. We had a backlog of legal opinions. We had some serious staffing issues because of budget constraints. And since that point, we've kind of turned the corner in terms of expediting appeals, providing for a mediation process, which was not in place when I got there. We've implemented a number of procedures to accelerate cases and to move the cases in such a way that people get their hearings quickly. And the result of all of our efforts has been to reduce our inventory to less than 4,000 cases now. And most of those cases that we have currently pending have been scheduled for hearing at least once. We've continued them because the parties didn't feel they were ready to go forward. So we gave them the opportunity to try and negotiate the case and settle it. And if in fact they couldn't settle it, then we scheduled a hearing. But we've made it our goal to make sure that everybody that wants to get their case heard in a timely fashion has that opportunity to come before us. And the result of that is that we've reduced that inventory from 30,000 cases down to about 4,000. And part of that 4,000 that we have is kind of like a churning. As I think as homeowners, you know that your property tax bills come out in May, but if it's a quarterly type situation, but your appeals are typically filed, abatement applications in February, and then if you're denied, they file with us, and our peak filing system is typically end of April through early July. So we may get 3,000 or 4,000 filings across the state at that point. So that number doesn't change that much over time. So there's always a rollover of 3,000 or 4,000 cases. So simply because we have 4,000 or so cases pending now doesn't mean they've been sitting there forever. Those are new filings that come in every year. We've also, now that the budget situation has become a little better, we've traveled around the state more and scheduled hearings out in Springfield and Northampton and Milford and down the Cape so that people don't have to trek into Boston to have their cases heard. So we were unable to do that for a couple of years because of budget constraints. We didn't have enough clerks, and we also didn't have any funds to travel, but because of our funding being restored, we've been able to do that. So I think that's important that taxpayers know that they don't have to come into Boston to get their cases heard. We also do some telephonic hearings, and some where people are disabled and can't make it into a governmental facility as well. So I think we've really established ourselves as being fair and efficient, and willing to listen. Probably 60% of our cases are pro se, where the homeowners or the property owners represent themselves. So we've made it our goal to have 4 court clerks who are good communicators who can explain the technical jurisdictional aspects of the cases, so that the person who comes before us is aware of what they have to provide in terms of evidence, what they need in terms of documentation, and what the jurisdictional rules are, which I think, as we all know, taxes, despite everybody's attempts, are not simple, they're complicated. So we really bend over backwards to make sure that the people who have a legitimate complaint get educated as to what they need to do to put their case on, and assist them, and then we try to decide the case as fairly as we can based upon the evidence. So I'm proud of my staff. I think they work extremely hard. They bend over backwards to make sure that Joe Sixpack or Mrs. Sixpack who come in, who are confused by the tax laws, understand what they need to do to prevail in best we can to assist them, provide a forum that is equitable and fair for everybody. So, I mean, I'm proud of my staff, I'm proud of the results that we've generated over the last few years, and I think, I look forward to continuing that mission. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. As a facilitator, I talk last, so I will, we have two councils that just arrived. And I do want to say that, it's publicly advertised for 10 o'clock, so I waited till 10 past 10. So here we have, Councilor Donahue. I'm sorry, Councilor Tom, I'm sorry.
It's an Irish
I've been sorry. And Councilor Ferrara. Any questions, Councilor?
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming today. Just in general, so I'm from a town that had a couple of power plants used to pay Appellate taxes in Somerset. I was police chief there, so taxes have doubled since then on residential stuff. So what's happening with the devaluation or valuation of flood power plants? Are you seeing anything in ways?
Well, I should say, I grew up in Colorado, Council, and I actually worked at the Brady Point Power Plant as a steam business apprentice for 3 years. So
All right.
I learned the inside outs of the power plant. It's a difficult question. The utility industry is really changing. I think, as people know, solar energy is a big component of the move to go forward. We've got the nuclear plant in Plymouth that's been decommissioned. We've got the plants in Somerset, Montauk, and West Brayton Point. I don't know what they call it now. They're tough issues. I mean, they're not generating any income anymore, and it's our feeling we decide these cases based upon expert testimony typically, but there isn't really any guidance from the legislature as to how these plants should be valued. And I think historically they were valued on a net book basis, which was original cost of the plant equipment minus accrued depreciation. We've modified our decisions, and the SJC has affirmed us in those because we felt that the ones that were operating were generating more income than what the net book theory was, reflective of. But as far as abandoned plants, there really hasn't been any guidance on what those plants are worth. And I think that's an issue for Somerset and Plymouth for sure. And there's other communities that have to deal with it. But I think it really is up to the legislature. We can only decide the cases based on the expert testimony that we get.
Yeah, so like in Somerset, they spent $600 million on those two cooling towers. They spent $400 million on structure. Spent $1 billion in the last 10 years. They want to be valued at, that they're out of business. And actually, they had a hearing last night with the company that bought them. So they're going to implode the towers in 2027, which is good. But the private company bought it. Talk about wind and solar, which is the next question. So I know an attorney who did an appellate tax argument for you guys. My understanding was that he prevailed and that solar farms were not taxable. That's what made a personal property. Can you enlighten me on that?
Yes, we ruled that under the statute that governs the exemption for solar property was enacted right during the oil embargo in the 1970s. And it was a very broadly written exemption. So that's still, we've had a number of cases in Westboro, in Kingston, and I believe in the Fall River area. Swansea. There have been moves to change that exemption in the legislature because it was originally thought that it was just simply a homeowner who put a solar panel on their house, that would be exempt. And then as the industry progressed, they have net metering agreements where they can hook up to the national grid or whatever the power distributor is and sell those credits. That probably wasn't even on the radar screen when that law passed. Interestingly, the legislature has modified the exemptions for income tax and sales tax and restricted them, but they haven't done it for the property taxes. So I think that's an issue that I believe there was a bill that almost got to the governor's desk last year to deal with it. But we interpreted the statute saying it's open-ended, there's no restrictions on it. Absent that, is an exemption that's gonna stand. The only, we have ruled, it's a quirk of the statute, because the statute says that solar power will be exempt as long as it services property that's taxable under the tax statutes. There have been a couple of communities that set up solar companies, and they sell 100% of their output to the community. Well, the community's property isn't taxable, so we held in that case that the property was not exempt. So, and that probably will be appealed. I'm not sure. They may say that we read the statute beyond what was contemplated. I don't know. But we try to interpret it as best we can based on the evidence that's presented in the way that the statute reads.
So, so they're talking about in Somerset, using the properties, 350 to manufacture solar, manufacturing products. Would those be taxable? Manufacturing?
I believe they would, yes. I mean, Thomas said the state probably would have the right to give some kind of incentives, but I believe that they would be taxable.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, you, so as I told you, eminently qualified for this job, and have such a great reputation. What's your favorite part about it? Why do you want to keep doing it?
Well, I've probably been doing state taxes for maybe 30-some years. It's amazing. There's always a new wrinkle, a new issue. It's interesting work. It's complicated. I also feel like I do my own taxes every year, and I'm constantly amazed at how confused I am when I do them. So I think it's important that people who have some background assist people, and I think one of our roles is to assist taxpayers, to explain to them. And sometimes we have to tell people, sadly, you don't have a case, but I think it's interesting. There's always new things that come about, like the solar thing that Council Ferrer was talking about.
Right.
You learn a lot every day, and sometimes, you have to step in and become a mediator. And one of the things I have to say that I've always been amazed at is there are some communities that the assessors continue to fight with taxpayers year after year. So we try to level the playing field, get them to dial it back a little bit and come to an equitable resolution. It doesn't always work, but that's the goal. So that's part of the job, I think.
That's an interesting thing that, so that's a very interesting point that some assessors are always arguing with because I've seen in one of the communities I represent, somebody put their house up for sale for a crazy amount of money. It wasn't worth. And of course the house never sold. This was years ago. And the assessor came in and upped the assessment by $300,000. And I mean, for absolutely no reason other than saying, well, they think their house is worth $1 million. That has no credence. I mean, it was astounding to me that they would actually say that. And I mean, it seemed like just such a gross overstretch.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy job. I mean, some communities elect assessors, others appoint them.
Right.
You'd like to think it would be more professionalized statewide, just because it can be contentious. I mean, people know what their houses are worth, and if the numbers put on those houses that's higher than what people think they can sell the house for,
right,
it's going to generate some action.
I'm a realtor, so I know, your house is worth what someone will pay for it.
Right.
At the end of the day, that's, people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
In Zillow and all these other things, they've never been in your house.
Right.
So they don't really mean it. What have you seen any, or are you expecting anything from the new federal tax law? Will that have any impact on you?
Yeah, it will, primarily on the corporate side, because our state corporate excise tax, which is in the sense of an income tax, piggybacks on a lot of the federal provisions.
Right.
Like some of these, there's a thing called GILTI, which is Global Intangible Low Tax Income. Yeah.
Nice acronym.
But basically, it's companies that use intellectual property over overseas and then
Okay.
dividend it back. This Department of Revenue decided they're gonna treat that as a dividend. Whether or not that's gonna be constitutionally taxable is gonna be an issue we'll probably have to deal with. Some of they scale back some of the interest deductions that companies can take, the state piggybacks and some of that. So there are a lot of those piggybacking provisions on the corporate side that are gonna be,
And we don't know yet, because it
Right,
doesn't,
they'll
this would be the first
Right.
tax season of it.
and then, some of the other issues will come up on the income tax. I think there's a provision to allow a 20% deduction for limited liability companies and partnerships to try to level the playing field with corporations, because they did
Yeah.
reduce the corporate rate. So that's another area that I think we'll probably see some cases.
It's gonna be interesting, because nobody really knows what's gonna happen. And, as realtors, our folks are always asking us, we don't know, because it's the first year. And there'll be bumps and there'll be everything, and some people will make out and some people won't, but, it's gonna be an interesting. Do you feel that you have the resources for it?
I think now we do.
Okay.
There was a time where the budgets were tight, that we kind of struggled, and
Yeah.
we did the best we could. As I said, we weren't able to travel on the state. We subsequently have been restored, and we've been able to fill positions that were left vacant, so I think we're in pretty good shape.
Good. Okay, I could talk about this forever, actually. I think it's, believe it or not, I find this very interesting. But I'm finished now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Councilor Casey who has joined us. Have any questions?
You can see the email. But we don't feel
Good morning.
right. Nice to see you again. Sorry for late phone tag. It's been a rough couple of weeks. I have some family stuff, so I'm just trying to play catch up. I pulled your file. I am not J. Edgar Hoover, but I do keep files on prior candidates and nominees that come before this council. And back in 2012, on May 9th, you and I had a conversation about General Law, Chapter 58A, Section 1, regarding the annual performance reviews of appellate board tax members. And that was something that I was interested in at the time. We had a nice discussion about it that day, and then you followed up with me with a letter from May 14th of 2012, basically explaining that there had been a process in place, but you would work with chief legal counsel as the chair to establish a more formalized evaluation process that supplements our current procedures so that all requirements of the statute are met. Any headway on that?
Yeah, I mean, we evaluate the other commissioners. Our offices are literally 2 feet apart from each other, so there's day-to-day contact. We decide cases as a board, so there's constantly feedback from the other commissioners as to the merits of each case. So we tend to self-assess each other as well as part of that process. We have revised our procedure for deciding cases by formalizing kind of templates for cases deciding, and basically those serve the evaluative process as well, because in going through those worksheets, you see that the commissioner who's presided over the case has evaluated the evidence and the testimony from both witnesses, both parties in the case, and that provides a good mechanism to review whether or not procedures that we have implemented are followed. So at the end of the day, I think that process has worked well in making sure that we have performance by the commissioners and also a fair and equitable decision-making process.
But there have been any, at the time back in 12, there was a system in place where there were reports which track for each member of the board, cases heard, date report, the date the record closed, excuse me, and the date of the decision, the date a party requested a written opinion. So these are reports that were basically from this letter in play back in 2012. Has there been any more formalized process with respect to these evaluations, which under Chapter 58A, it's a statutory requirement that annual written evaluations of each board member of the appellate board are to be conducted. And back then, it appeared that it hadn't been done in several years. So I'm wondering if there's been any more formalized process in place.
Well, we still do that annual, well, actually, we do a monthly listing of cases heard, cases decided where they are to make sure that those cases that have been heard and are pending within the deadlines that have been established by the statute. So that process continues. And then I typically meet with each of the commissioners to make sure that they're adhering to the guidelines that have been set up in the statute. And if there's a reason why a case is taking longer to be decided, that's documented and becomes part of the file. So there's still, we come up with a number of drafts to try and put in place an evaluation, a written evaluation system. But because we've had turnover of commissioners, there have been different types of cases that have been assigned to particular commissioners because of their expertise. Uniformity of evaluation has been difficult. There are some members that deal only with property tax cases and don't deal with Department of Revenue cases. So trying to come up with a uniform evaluation system that would one size fits all, we haven't been able to do that effectively. What we try to focus on is the inventory of each commissioner and making sure that they comply with the statutory requirements for the time deadlines for deciding the cases. So the answer to your question is we don't have a written evaluation that per se would say, you're rated A, B, C, or D. What we've done is try to make sure that each individual commissioner's inventory is tracked and monitored so that the compliance with the statute in that sense continues to be effective.
Yeah, but I mean, you would agree with me that the plain reading of that statute requires annual written performance evaluations of members of the board,
Right.
commissioners.
It also requires the governor's chief counsel to evaluate me. That's never been done either, so.
Well, maybe he has, because you're sitting here for reappointment.
Yes, right.
I think that might be Mr. Bovich's answer to that. And I'm not saying you don't run a good shop over there, Attorney Hammond, at all. I'm not, I mean, that's not, just, I was preparing for the hearing today, and it was a conversation that we had. And honestly, as somebody who sat on the board in executive capacity, having to review people annually, it's a very difficult process when you have to write down, annual reviews of peers or people that you work with on a daily basis or whose office is right next to yours. And but for us, for example, if we're here today as members are reappointed to serve, I know that would be very helpful. I understand what you're saying as far as the inventory, keeping track of the inventory of the cases or number of cases and the time frame that it takes a commissioner to get the decisions out and that kind of thing. But I just think that it really helps everybody, particularly where you do have strong members over there. And I haven't had any complaints from anybody, either from municipalities, government district, assessors, town managers, selectmen, about any dealing with your board. I think it would be helpful for people. And even though I understand that everybody has their specialty, their expertise, but judges are reviewed, not to the greatest extent that some people want them to be, but you have a judge who's sitting in Superior Court hearing criminal cases, murder cases, he's being evaluated, and so is a judge who's sitting in Superior Court hearing med mals. So I get what you're saying, there's a niche, but there's got to be some universal performance-based evaluation that can be, put together. Thinking of workers' comp, they have a review board. How many cases does the judge hear? It's more, I think, almost like an efficiency performance evaluation. How many cases? How long did it take to get the decisions out? And it's not mean, it's certainly not about keeping track of who wins or loses, whether it's the government or the private citizen, as far as, you know, the evaluations. But, I just think that it would be helpful, and I'm not putting all the burden on you, because it sounds like we spoke about this closer to a decade ago than not, it hadn't been done in 20 years. So I know you inherited it, and, you know,
I mean, we did produce a couple of forms and circulate them to the commissioners. And it generated a lot of confusion about, well, I don't really deal with that case. So we tried to tweak it, and then we just kind of, it fell by the wayside, just because part of it was we felt that the reporting requirements that each commissioner has, that I circulate to them based on their inventory, that was a good bellwether of what they were doing in terms of their performance. So, I apologize for not taking it any further, but I think we got distracted with a lot of other things that we had to do in terms of turnover of commissioners and staffing as well.
Can the chief legal counsel help you with this? I mean, I know, I like the fact that you know, other commissioners were brought in, because I think you can buy it from everybody, whatever type of evaluation it would be.
Well, I mean, he was involved initially. He's sitting right here, but I mean, we did try to. We didn't feel like we could get to a point that would be a productive exercise in terms of adding to the stuff that we already had in place. But I mean, I guess that's a failing that I have to.
Well, I mean, just selfishly, if I were a commissioner and I'm up for reappointment, and I had a nice jacket, personnel jacket that had my performance evaluations in it, that showed I was on time, I was polite, I was courteous, I got the decisions out, you know, I conducted, good hearings, whatever the criteria are gonna be right down the road. These are basic things, you know, this is not, you know, I mean, I would wanna pull that out and say, look, this is the job that I've done. So just from almost a self-preservation standpoint, you know, to get to that point, and of course, it's good for the public too, because then the public, you know, is aware that taxpayers are, they've got some good people over there. So, I mean, I'm just gonna raise the issue again, and.
Well, no, I mean, I guess the other question we kind of wrestled with and didn't get an answer on is the fact that personnel files are not public records. So then the question is, if someone didn't want that disclosed, there was some pushback that people didn't want to feel like they needed to have an evaluation on the public because it's part of their personnel file. So, I mean, that was another issue.
Well, I mean, certainly if you have a good track record, it's something that you could waive that and
Right.
produce, and if you don't, then you hide behind that, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have a bad review, somebody's, you know, gonna catch wind of it, whether it's being public or not, you're not gonna be sitting in that chair that you're in. I don't know. It's from 2012. I pulled it out and reviewing for today. I mean, I just reiterate the request. I know you're busy, and you know, you guys do a great job over there. Again, it's not a criticism of any of that. So you've been in this line of work since 1975, government and tax
Yes.
kind of thing. Well, 41 years in the public sector and 3 years in the private sector. How do you maintain the balance? I mean, given the fact that you've been, you know, in the public sector so long, how do you not lose track of, I mean, obviously you're a taxpayer, so that will keep you grounded, but.
I mean, I think as my practice as an attorney has always been to be fair. I think when I was in the Department of Revenue as a staff litigator, if I felt that our assessment was not justified, I recommended a full abatement, and if the higher up said, no, that's not going to be good enough, you got to settle, then I settled the case, but I made it clear that if I didn't think an assessment was defensible, that it should be, you know, resolved in favor of the taxpayer. So, I mean, I've always felt that way, and I think my experience in the private sector led me to understand better the complexity and the daunting nature that people face when they deal with
Steve, that's so glad. Produced some good lawyers out of that school.
Yes.
I think Sheriff Casey would agree with me. So, well, thank you for answering my questions, and again, I only hear good things over there, what you're doing and what you've been doing as chairman. This will be your third term, second as chairman, I believe, or third as chairman.
Third as chairman.
No, third as chairman. God bless you, some people wouldn't want that job as chairman. There's a lot that goes with it, I'm sure.
My wife kind of asks me about that occasionally, so.
Well, thank you for serving, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Welcome back. I do want to tell council that previously before you came, I did say publicly that the council has no control when the commission's term expires, and it has been a concern of councilors. And Mr. Hammond has given a 6-year term, and actually it's 5 years, because it's 1 year overdue on Saturday. And Patricia Good was here over a year and a half, her term expired. And I want to publicly know that we have no control of that, and we have asked that people be told, because you go to work every day, you don't know whether you're gonna have a job, whether you're gonna be reappointed. I think people deserve that respect for working for the Commonwealth. So I just want to thank you. So, been voting for you since 2006, so I know so much about you, but the thing is that, I want to know, you started out with about 30,000 cases, right? How has that increased through the years now?
Well,
Or has,
no, it's decreased. It went down,
or has it?
went down to less than 4,000 or so.
Okay. Now, how many citizens come before you about their, in our municipalities that come before you to appeal their taxes?
Typically get between 3,000 and 5,000 a year.
I have to tell you, I have such respect for this Appellate Tax Board, because I've been here 2 years. In all that time, we just had one person that was rejected because everyone had complaints. Citizens, corporations, members of the board, everyone. She just was rude to everyone and disrespectful. And I have to say, what a wonderful record that is, that all of you have been outstanding, and you don't get any complaints at all. And that's really wonderful. And I do want to say, a lot of people out there do not know the Appellate Tax Board, what commission, and actually what we do. But I do want to say, and Council Casey hit on it, you've been doing this type of work since 1975. But I do want to mention and put it on the record, your background. And, I'm going to start with 1982, Commonwealth of Massachusetts Joint Committee on Taxation, and then the Tax Council Litigation Bureau, and then you went on to Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Revenue, and you supervised staff of 20 attorneys, and you set up guidelines for settling cases and expediting the trial of state revenue cases, and alliance on in general. But the one that I think really adds to your qualifications is that in 1992 and 1998, you worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts House of Representatives Post-Audit and Oversight Bureau, and you directed and supervised development and implementation of legislative auditing programs of all state and municipal agencies and constituent offices. You conducted legislative investigations and performed audits, interviewed and examined witnesses at legislative hearings, and you advised the House Post-Audit and Oversight Committee on all pertinent legal matters. And, you've gone on to working in private practice for a few years, and then on to the Commonwealth Department of Revenue before you became. And, all of this is, makes you so qualified to be the chair. Now, tell me, your responsibility as a chair, it's been 9 years, I believe, right? So how does that change from you being a member you have implemented changes in different positions of people, you've lost staff. So tell me how the responsibilities change.
Well, I think, as we've dealt with caseload changes, we try to assign people based on their ability to hear cases. There have been new commissions that have